Picture this. A 2-ton luxury sedan, leather seats, wood trim, air conditioning humming quietly, pulling up next to a stripped-down muscle car at a red light. The muscle car driver revs his engine, confident, smug, ready to leave the old man's car in the dust. The light turns green, and the luxury car disappears first. This isn't fiction. This actually happened over and over again throughout the 1960s, and almost nobody talks about it. Today we're diving into 10 American luxury cars from the 1960s that were built for comfort, for elegance, for silence, and somehow ended up faster than the muscle cars they were never supposed to compete with. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how a car with a chandelier-quality interior could out-accelerate a car built purely for speed, and I promise you, the last car on this list is going to completely change how you think about what a luxury car even means. Stick around, because number 7 has a secret hidden inside its transmission that sounds almost impossible for 1966. Let's get into it. We start in 1968 with the Buick Riviera Gran Sport, a car that did everything in its power to look like it wasn't in a hurry. At over 17 feet long, wrapped in wood trim, wide leather seats, and headlights hidden behind a grille that swallowed the entire front end, the Riviera looked like a private living room that happened to have wheels. This was a car built for executives, for quiet Sunday drives, for people who wanted to arrive somewhere looking dignified. But underneath all that restraint was something else entirely. More than 4,190 pounds of American steel, pushed forward by a 430 cubic inch V8 producing 360 horsepower and a brutal 475 pound-feet of torque. In period testing, this enormous, elegant coupe reached 60 miles per hour in around 8.1 seconds, tore through the quarter mile in 15.9 seconds, and comfortably cruised past 120 miles per hour. Those are not numbers you'd expect from Buick's most expensive, most refined automobile of the year. And here's the twist that most people don't know. The Gran Sport badge on this car didn't add a single extra horsepower. Every Riviera that year used the exact same engine. The real secret was buried beneath the car, in a more aggressive final drive ratio, a limited slip differential, and firmer suspension tuning. Engineering that made sure all that force actually reached the pavement instead of spinning away uselessly. Buick built over 49,000 Rivieras that year, but only 5,337 received this package, which meant most people who wanted speed with silence never even knew it existed. This was a Grand Tourer disguised as a country club cruiser, a car for someone who wanted air conditioning, thick carpeting, total silence, but absolutely refused to watch another car's taillights vanish into the distance. And if you think that's surprising, wait until you hear what Chrysler did on the beach in Florida. In February of 1960, on the wet sand of Daytona Beach, an enormous Chrysler crossed the flying mile at an average speed of 144.927 miles per hour. Read that again. Almost 145 miles per hour in a car with leather seats, massive fins, and enough interior space to comfortably seat 4 adults. This was the Chrysler 300F, and this wasn't some stripped-down lightweight prototype. It kept its full luxury body, its full weight, everything. The standard version already used a 413 cubic inch V8, making 375 horsepower and 495 pound-feet of torque, but the truly extraordinary part was mounted above the engine. 2 4-barrel carburetors, positioned at opposite ends, connected by enormous intake runners that crossed over the top of the engine block like something out of a race car. Chrysler had discovered that these long tubes used air pressure waves to fill the cylinders more efficiently, giving the engine a brutal punch of power at low and medium speeds. The result was a car weighing over 2 tons that could hit 60 miles per hour in around 8 seconds. But for that record run at Daytona, Chrysler built a tiny batch of special 300F models with 400 horsepower, more aggressive camshafts, special exhaust systems, and modified intake runners tuned to breathe better at high RPM. One of these cars, tested by Motor Life magazine, accelerated from 0 to 60 in just 7.2 seconds, and its power ran through an extremely rare French Pontiac 4-speed manual transmission, the exact same gearbox used in the exclusive Facel Vega. Think about that for a second. Racing engineering, hidden inside one of the most luxurious American cars of 1960. Most buyers got a push-button automatic transmission instead, and only a small handful ever got access to that manual gearbox. In total, just 1,212 examples of the 300F were ever built, coupes and convertibles combined. For a few unforgettable seconds on that Florida beach, this luxury cruiser was the fastest American production car in its entire class. And that's only car number 2. Wait until you hear about the car John DeLorean built specifically to embarrass the GTO. The 1969 Pontiac Grand Prix SJ428HO is where things start to get genuinely wild. To understand this car, you first have to look at its hood, because John DeLorean wanted it to be the longest hood in the entire industry, an enormous stretch of metal that made the driver feel like they were sitting almost directly over the rear axle. Step inside, and the cabin abandons the traditional dashboard layout completely. Instruments, switches, and controls wrap around the driver like the cockpit of an airplane. DeLorean wasn't trying to build another GTO here. He was going for something far more ambitious, a muscle car that could roll into the parking lot of an exclusive private club and never look out of place. The SJ version already came with a 370 horsepower 428 V8, front disc brakes, a reinforced rear axle, and self-leveling suspension, but for an extra $119, buyers could add the 428 high-output package. Higher compression, a more aggressive camshaft, high-flow exhaust manifolds, and 390 horsepower. Paired with a 4-speed manual transmission and a 3.90 rear axle ratio, this enormous personal luxury coupe could rocket from 0 to 60 in around 6.8 seconds and complete the quarter mile in roughly 14.5 seconds. That was fast enough to genuinely chase down a GTO, even while its driver sat surrounded by padded seats, wood trim, power steering, and white wall tires. And here's where the rarity becomes almost unbelievable. Pontiac built 112,486 Grand Prix models that year, but only 1,105 of them got the 428HO engine. Of those, 986 came with the Turbo 400 automatic transmission, which means only 119 examples in the entire world left the factory with a manual gearbox and this engine combination. Even the naming was a tribute. DeLorean called the base model the J and the top version the SJ. A direct nod to the legendary Duesenberg, one of America's greatest pre-war symbols of luxury and speed. Now here's a question worth sitting with. Would you rather have this Grand Prix, disguised in leather and wood, quietly waiting to embarrass a GTO at a stoplight? Or would you take the lighter, louder, more obvious muscle car instead? Keep that question in mind, because it's going to come up again before this video ends. Next up, imagine pulling up to a traffic light behind the wheel of an 18.4-foot-long Cadillac weighing over 2 tons, sealed off from the outside world in a cabin with power seats and total silence. A much smaller, much lighter car pulls up beside you. The light turns green. And somehow, the Cadillac is the first one gone. This is the 1968 Cadillac Eldorado, and in that year it received a brand new 472 cubic inch V8, the equivalent of 7.7 liters. It made 375 horsepower, but the number that actually mattered was its 525 pound-feet of torque, available at just 3,000 RPM. This acceleration didn't feel like a nervous, high-strung explosion the way a muscle car does. It felt like an enormous wave, quietly pushing the entire mass of the car forward. It could hit 60 in around 8.6 seconds and clear the quarter mile in about 16.8 seconds. On paper, plenty of muscle cars were faster, but almost none of them could repeat those numbers while carrying 4 passengers surrounded by leather, wood trim, automatic climate control, and total Cadillac silence. But here's where it gets genuinely strange. The true madness of this car was hidden beneath the hood. The massive V8 sat mounted longitudinally, but the automatic transmission was positioned right beside it instead of behind it. To connect the two, General Motors engineered a wide, silent metal chain that transferred the power sideways to the front wheels. 525 pound-feet of torque traveling through a chain before it even attempted to move a front-wheel drive luxury car forward. When a driver accelerated too aggressively, the front tires could actually struggle for grip while that enormous hood lifted slightly into the air. But once it was moving, the Eldorado felt built to devour entire highways without effort. Cadillac produced over 24,000 of these that year. This wasn't a rare racing special or an experimental one-off. It was a regular production luxury car that quietly combined revolutionary engineering, massive dimensions, and enough raw power to humiliate machines that were half its weight. And speaking of hidden engines in unexpected places, in 1968, Ford had a genuinely strange catalog. The car sent to chase down a Mustang or a Torino on public roads could just as easily be a Ford LTD, complete with a vinyl roof, wood trim, and seats so soft they seemed to belong in someone's living room. That's because the exact same engine used in Ford's most aggressive machines could also be ordered inside this full-size luxury sedan. The LTD could be equipped with the 7-liter 428 Thunderbird V8 fed by a 4-barrel carburetor, producing 340 horsepower and, more importantly for moving something this large, 462 pound-feet of torque at just 2,800 RPM. It wasn't the explosive 428 Cobra jet, but it had more than enough strength to push nearly 2 tons of luxury sedan with unsettling ease. In a Motor Trend test, an automatic LTD hit 60 in 9.3 seconds and ran the quarter mile in 16.8. Numbers that seem modest for a muscle car. But remember, this particular example had an extremely tall 2.80 final drive ratio, chosen specifically for silence and fuel economy at highway speeds, not for launching off the line. But Ford allowed something far more absurd if you knew what to order. Combine that same 428 engine with a 4-speed top-loader manual transmission, dual exhaust, a traction lock differential, and much shorter rear axle gearing, and suddenly you had something else entirely. It was genuinely possible to walk into a Ford dealership in 1968 and order a full-size LTD with a formal roof and practically the same drivetrain used in some of Ford's most aggressive performance cars of the era. One of these cars even left the factory with air conditioning, power windows, an 8-track player, heavy-duty suspension, and a 4.11 rear differential. Executive comfort, configured like it was about to line up for a drag race. Then there's the 1968 Chrysler New Yorker, a car so contradictory it almost doesn't make sense. In the backseat, a passenger could recline until the chair practically became a chaise lounge. Meanwhile, the driver had, right beneath their foot, an engine that powered some of Chrysler's most feared muscle cars of the era. Before the fuselage redesign completely changed the lineup in 1969, this model kept a straighter, more formal body, 4 headlights, enormous chrome surfaces, and a length of nearly 18.3 feet. This was the Chrysler for someone who wanted thick carpeting, elaborate upholstery, and total silence, engineered carefully through a unitized body held together by thousands of individual welds. But its standard engine was anything but discreet, a 440 cubic inch, 7.2-liter V8 with a 4-barrel carburetor, producing 350 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque, connected to the durable 3-speed TorqueFlite automatic transmission. Power arrived early and completely without drama. The car would simply lift its nose slightly and begin to surge forward as if its enormous mass had temporarily disappeared. And if a buyer wanted to push the contradiction even further, they could order the 440 TNT package, adding a high-performance camshaft, dual exhaust, and a dual snorkel air cleaner, bumping output to 375 horsepower. Modern estimates place a well-configured 2-door hardtop at around 6.8 seconds to 60 and roughly 15.2 seconds in the quarter mile. Extraordinary numbers for a car built to comfortably carry 6 adults. And here's the most absurd part of all. The most powerful trim of this luxury sedan and the most relaxing trim of this luxury sedan were, technically, the same car, sitting right next to each other on the same order form. Would you rather be relaxing in that reclining seat, or would you rather be behind the wheel of the 440 TNT? Hold on to that thought, because we're only halfway through this list, and things are about to get even stranger. In 1966, Oldsmobile made a decision that seemed almost mechanically insane. They decided to send 475 pound-feet of torque through the front wheels of a coupe weighing over 2 tons. This was the Oldsmobile Toronado, the first American production car with front-wheel drive since the 1937 Cord, nearly 3 decades earlier. Its 425 cubic inch rocket V8 produced 385 horsepower, but the real spectacle wasn't the number, it was the transmission. The engine sat mounted longitudinally, and a metal chain transferred power sideways to an automatic transmission positioned right beside it, essentially the same wild engineering trick Cadillac would later use in the Eldorado. Before Oldsmobile even approved this system for production, they put it through more than 1 million miles of testing. Under hard acceleration, the front tires could genuinely protest, and that immense hood would visibly rise toward the sky. And yet, a Motor Trend test recorded 0 to 60 in 9.5 seconds and a quarter mile in 17.2 seconds, with other measurements placing its top speed near 130 miles per hour. That's a serious number for a luxury car weighing almost 4,500 pounds. But its real talent wasn't a straight-line sprint. During a 2,769-mile test drive between Michigan and California, a journalist crossed the entire state of Nevada at 90 miles per hour with the windows completely closed, in total comfort. When they finally rolled the windows down after arriving in Las Vegas, the ordinary city traffic noise actually felt deafening by comparison. That one small anecdote tells you more about the Toronado than any spec sheet could. It could cross an entire country at enormous speed without ever turning the journey into an ordeal. Even its speedometer refused to be conventional, using a rotating vertical drum instead of a needle, as if speed were something the machine wanted to reveal to you slowly, piece by piece. Now here's where things get almost theatrical. Mercury didn't try to hide the size of the 1969 Marauder X100, they turned it into the entire spectacle. This car measured over 18 feet long, rode on a 121-inch wheelbase, and weighed close to 4,300 pounds. Its roofline dropped dramatically between massive rear pillars, forming what Mercury called the tunnel roof, and the section running from the base of the rear window all the way to the trunk could be painted matte black, giving this gigantic coupe what looked like a racing stripe over 6.5 feet long. And this appearance wasn't just for show. Every single X100 left the factory with a 7-liter 429 V8, a 4-barrel carburetor, dual exhaust, 360 horsepower, and 480 pound-feet of torque. There was no smaller, weaker engine option hiding behind the badge. Buying the X100 name meant you automatically got the big engine, no exceptions. In a Car Life magazine test, it accelerated from 0 to 60 in 7.8 seconds and covered the quarter mile in 15.13 seconds, crossing the finish line at 92.3 miles per hour. That's practically muscle car territory, despite carrying an automatic transmission, power steering, front disc brakes, and comfortable seating for 6 full-sized adults. Its standard 2.80 final drive ratio wasn't built for a violent launch off the line. It was designed to let that massive 429 breathe slowly and let the Marauder build enormous, effortless speed on the open highway, which is exactly where this car found its true purpose. Long overtaking maneuvers, endless straightaways, the horizon disappearing beneath that enormous hood. Mercury even offered individual bucket seats, a center console, and leather upholstery. Although a 4-speed manual was never offered on this car, this wasn't meant for someone wrestling a gear lever at every red light. It was built for someone who wanted real speed without ever giving up the feeling of traveling like an executive. Only 5,635 units were ever built in 1969, and the X100 lasted just 2 years total, but it left behind an image that's almost impossible to replicate today, a genuine muscle car, stretched out until it reached the size of a yacht. At the Chevrolet dealership, the 1966 Caprice looked exactly like the brand's polite answer to more expensive luxury cars. Deeply padded seats, simulated walnut trim, a formal roofline, and a suspension tuned purely for smooth, quiet travel. But flip a few pages further into that same catalog, and buyers found an option that could completely ruin all that tranquility, the Turbojet 427. This 7-liter V8 produced 390 horsepower and 470 pound-feet of torque, and it could be paired not just with the standard turbo-hydromatic automatic, but with a fully synchronized 4-speed manual transmission. Think about what that actually meant in practice. A large, formal luxury Chevrolet with room for 5 or 6 passengers, equipped with a clutch pedal, a floor-mounted shifter, and the exact same engine displacement as a Corvette. In the custom coupe body style, the complete package weighed around 4,035 pounds. There's no single definitive period test covering every possible combination, but careful simulations based on its actual gear ratios and specifications estimate around 6 seconds to 60 miles per hour and roughly 14.6 seconds in the quarter mile for a well-configured manual 427. That's genuine, undeniable muscle car performance, hiding inside a car that looked like it belonged to a lawyer on his way to the office. And, curiously, Chevrolet actually drew a line here. The even more brutal 425 horsepower version of the 427 could be installed in other large Chevrolet models that year, but the factory catalog specifically stated it was not available in the Caprice. Even Detroit apparently believed that 390 horsepower was already plenty for a car with elegant chrome moldings and interior courtesy lights in all four doors. Even so, buyers could still add a Posey traction differential, heavy-duty suspension, individual straddle bucket seats, a center console, and a tachometer. Seen from the outside, it still looked exactly like a conservative family car heading to church on Sunday. From behind the wheel, every single gear change could turn it into one of the most unsettling sleepers of 1966, a car nobody at the stoplight would ever suspect. And finally, we arrive at the car that might sum up this entire era better than any other, the 1966 Ford Thunderbird. Ford marketed driving this car as something close to piloting an airplane. The driver had speed controls built directly into the steering wheel, an overhead panel with warning lights for fuel, doors, and seatbelts, and a cartridge-based stereo system capable of filling the cabin with music for over an hour without repeating a track. But this road-going airplane had just received a far more serious engine. For the very first time, the Thunderbird could be equipped with the 7-liter 428 Vite, producing 345 horsepower and 462 pound-feet of torque at only 2,800 RPM. Compared to the standard 390 engine's 315 horsepower, paired with the 3-speed Cruise-O-Matic automatic, this didn't turn the Thunderbird into some nervous, high-strung muscle car. Instead, it transformed it into an enormous, endless reserve of power that was always sitting right there, waiting. At nearly 17.1 feet long and weighing around 2 tons, a well-tuned 428 could hit 60 miles per hour in around 9 seconds and approach 120 miles per hour with ease. That acceleration felt even stranger from inside those deeply contoured shell seats, while the swing-away steering wheel made getting in and out effortless, and sequential taillights swept across the entire width of the car whenever you signaled a turn. But the most sophisticated feature of all was its early cruise control system. The driver would set their desired speed using a bar built directly into the steering wheel. A separate control could cancel it, apply gentle deceleration, and then automatically return the car to that exact selected pace. It was primitive by today's standards, but it was a genuinely theatrical way to control your speed on a highway back in 1966. The Thunderbird had originally been born as a compact 2-seat sports car in the 50s. A decade later, it had grown larger, quieter, and dramatically more luxurious. But that 428 engine proved that underneath all that futuristic technology, there was still more than enough raw violence to lift that long hood and send the entire car vanishing down the highway. So there you have it, 10 American luxury cars from the 1960s that were never supposed to be fast, and yet every single one of them found its own unique way to embarrass cars built specifically for speed. Some of them did it through massive torque delivered at absurdly low RPM. Some of them did it through hidden performance packages buried deep in option lists that most buyers never even knew existed. And some of them did it through genuinely radical engineering, like sending power through metal chains to the front wheels, decades before that became normal. What all 10 of these cars prove is something most people completely misunderstand about the 1960s, the idea that luxury and speed were somehow opposites, that comfort had to come at the cost of performance. These cars destroy that idea completely. Now I want to know what you think. Which one of these 10 cars would you actually choose to drive across the country on a long American highway? And out of everything we just covered, which one genuinely shocked you the most? Was it the Cadillac sending 525 pound-feet of torque through a chain? Was it the 428 HO Grand Prix built specifically to hunt down a GTO? Or was it something else entirely? Leave your answer in the comments below. I read every single one of them. And if you enjoyed discovering just how fast these luxury cruisers actually were, you are going to be even more shocked by what comes next, because we have an entire video covering the most elegant, most extravagant American land yachts of the 1960s. Cars even larger and even more over the top than everything you just saw here. Go check that one out next, and I'll see you there.